after people are being put in detention and they are there for a couple of days, they're being bussed out of the city and um, dumped in the desert in Mali, for example, in an area where there are also jihadist groups active.
They are targeting only black people, and there is a story in the report, in the Lighthouse report, about a U.S. citizen that was abducted and sent to the desert. Imagine if he didn't have money, if he didn't know people, he would stay there, he would be in a different country.
What we are calling the refugee crisis is not a crisis of scale. It really is not. It is a crisis of political will in this matter, and everything on top of this, racism for sure.
In my country, being a woman itself is a crime.
In my country, it is illegal for a women's voice to be heard in the street.
In my country, my creative freedom can cost me my blood.
I have a refugee protection, but I'm invisible.
I have a refugee protection, but freedom is not free. You have to buy it.
I don't even have a country. Try being an activist when you're stateless.
I have refugee status, but without NGOs like Refocus, I wouldn't have any support.
I am a recognized refugee in Europe, but I'm still being stopped at airports for holding a refugee travel document.
In Refocus, I can be myself, an artist, in a safe place.
In Refocus, I can be brave in my art and reconnect with activism.
In Refocus, I can create media and teach others.
I stayed here because of Refocus. I bet on Refocus because there is no creative borders here.
Our community wants to say thank you to everyone who has been so generous with their support. But we still need your help to ensure our community continues. You can help change someone's life just like ours by donating today.
Welcome back to Fractured. In this episode, we will cover a very important topic, a 1-year-long investigation of several journalists connected to a Lighthouse Report investigation. And one of those journalists today is with us to discuss the situation in North Africa. Klaas van Dijken is a freelance journalist, usually working in war zones, as I read.
Well, actually, I'm one. I'm not a freelancer anymore. I used to be a freelancer for many years, but since 2019, I'm one of the founders and directors of Lighthouse Reports.
Wonderful. Klaas, we invited you here to actually discuss and to learn more about what is happening in North Africa with asylum seekers and migrants, people who try to cross to Europe. So every year, tens of thousands of asylum seekers are being dumped basically in the desert or in some remote areas in North Africa. And it is all to prevent them from coming to Europe. According to your investigation, how does it look like? What is really going on there?
So we investigated and focused on 3 countries in northern Africa: Tunisia, Morocco, and Mauritania. And what we discovered that in all of these 3 countries, wherever the government forces, they are on a daily basis arresting people on the streets, and then mainly black African migrants and asylum seekers. They're arresting them on the streets. They put them on buses and put them in detention centers. And then from these detention centers, they are transporting people, men, women, children, to remote areas or the desert, and they just leave them there without any food or water or any assistance.
You mentioned Morocco and Tunisia and Libya.
Mauritania.
Mauritania.
And Mauritania.
I saw in April 2024, I think, the president of Tunisia and the president of Algeria and the head of Libya's presidential council, they have a meeting in Tunisia and they discussed better coordinate border security. For me, I call it, maybe they discussed how to torture people effectively. And, they talk about a lot of stuff and mainly about migrants. And I wanted to ask you, what has been the role of North African government in facilitating these deportations?
The North African countries or the governments, they are basically carrying out the work that Europe doesn't want to do themselves. So European governments and the European Union, what their aim is that they want to avoid that people are crossing from Africa into Europe, and they make deals with Northern African countries. So they give a lot of money, equipment, other kind of support. With, in exchange, the promise from these countries that they will prevent people from crossing the central Mediterranean towards Europe. And the Northern African countries, what they are doing is providing the infrastructure for these kind of operations, which are completely illegal.
I read an article you wrote, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, and the title is How a Brutal Militia Leader Became Europe's New Henchman. You talked about the role of Khalifa Haftar with his militia intercepting refugees in the Mediterranean Sea and taking them to Libya and then dumping them in the deserts. What role these private organizations, third-party organizations play in these operations?
Yeah, so Europe goes really far when it comes to controlling migration. So whenever let's take one step back. Europe tells its audience or the constituencies, taxpayers, that they are doing everything they can to what they call crush the gangs. So they are saying we have to fight smuggling and human trafficking, because they are the real problem. They are the reason why people can come to Europe. And if we stop the human trafficking and the human smuggling, then we reached our goal. And people will not come to Europe anymore because there's no facilitation, and people will just stay in Africa where Europe would like them to have. This is, of course, for multiple reasons, complete fiction. It is, the smugglers are not the real problem. They often are also called the facilitators, or the travel agents for people that are seeking safety. But what Europe is actually doing, or European countries are actually doing, is that they are working or happy to work together with militias like Khalifa Haftar, or the son of Khalifa Haftar. And Haftar is a warlord that is controlling most of eastern Libya, and he established some kind of government there, but that's not recognized by the European Union. It's the western side of Libya and the government there that's recognized by the EU, but they are still happy to work with this man when it comes to stop migration.
It seems that they are targeting only black people, and there is a story in the Lighthouse Report, about a U.S. citizen that was abducted and sent to the desert. Imagine if he didn't have money, if he didn't know people, he would stay there, he would be in a different country. And also I saw in 2023 Libya deporting 350 Egyptians, and I told you before, and they were treated really nice because they are Egyptians, they are afraid of Egypt. And so how does this racial profiling factor into the selection of individuals for these deportations?
I think this American at the time was a resident of Morocco, right? And he was actually in one of those deportation centers or something of this sort for several months before he managed to clarify the situation.
Yeah. So what happens to a lot of people who are not Moroccan and who are black, and are either working in Morocco or are there to willing to or with a plan to move to Europe, or just temporary, or as a tourist. What I've seen happening in Morocco is that the Moroccan authorities, they have a special group, paramilitary group, the auxiliary forces that are putting white fans and strategic places in the city. And these areas where they put the fence are the areas where mainly black people are living and are doing their shopping, etc. That they are at the markets, and they have plainclothes agents scouting the streets for everyone that is black. And then when whenever they see somebody, they can just grab that person from behind with one or two people. They call the people in the van passes by, and they put the people in the back of the white van, and they drive them to administrative kind of buildings, and then they keep them there for the day. And then by the end of the day, they all gather the people at a large police station, in, for example, the capital Rabat. And then each night there is a huge bus going out of the city, and they dump people in a remote place in Morocco. And this is happening on it's really a system. It's happening on daily basis, on an industrial scale, and it's happening to tens of thousands of people each year.
Klaas, so I assume that by now people already realize this, right? So when they come to countries like Morocco, for example, they know that they can be captured and dumped again in the desert. Are they trying to hide somewhere in urban centers or outside urban centers? We've been to the border between Morocco and Ceuta. So we were in Ceuta in the Spanish enclave, right? And a friend was showing us on the other side where people stay in the jungle, and sometimes those being also raided, and people are being taken somewhere farther. Is this what is happening everywhere basically right now in Morocco?
I think in the cities, people are there are many people who are avoiding going out during the day. So they're only going out when it is dark, and there's less police on the street. Or as somebody told me, he will take a child with him on the street. That person didn't have children himself, but then he took a child from a friend to go out, because he was saying, well, they arrest people, but they arrest adults, and they don't take black people when they're together with a child. So in a way, he was saying a child is my residency permit in Morocco, because that's the only way I can go out during the day. So that's how they do it in the cities. And it's true. And in other places, they're hiding outside the cities, and try to avoid being arrested by police or other forces.
Mhm. In your investigation, you are uncovering certain things, the obvious connection of the European Union. So you're saying that European Union not only finances those operations, but is also directly involved in it. Can you tell us how did you come to this conclusion?
Yeah. So in especially in Mauritania, there's a very clear example on how European countries are directly collaborating with governments to carry out these clandestine operations. In Mauritania, it is when people are being arrested at sea, for example, when they're on the way to the Canaries, they are often intercepted because the Spanish or the Spanish Guardia Civil, the Spanish police, gave the coordinates of certain boats, refugee boats, to the Mauritanian authorities. And these people are being intercepted, and they are put in detention centers where Spanish officers have access to. And some of our team members have seen this themselves, that Spanish officers entered the detention center. These officers then take photographs of people who are in the centers, and we know that they are also getting the lists of names of people that are about to be deported to Mali and Senegal. So, and we know that also in Mauritania, in the largest cities, there are on a daily basis raids going on, and we know through sources that Spanish officers are accompanying Mauritanian forces to carry out these street operations. And that and then after people are being put in detention and they are there for a couple of days, they're being bussed out of the city and dumped in the desert in Mali, for example, in an area where there are also jihadist groups active. So it's really that's really a war zone.
Yes, exactly. That's basically an active war zone. Horrible things are happening right now in Mali.
Absolutely, and we tried to go there ourselves, but we weren't allowed in by the Mauritanian authorities at that time, because they were making a new deal with Europe to get more funding to stop migration, and they were saying as long as this deal hasn't been signed, we are not allowing any journalist in to cover migration in our country.
In some cases, I heard that these people are forced to join militias and even Boko Haram, because you either join them or you die. So they select some of them. When they find them, they give them this choice if you want to join or not. It's really bad. Your investigation is really amazing, especially for the people who don't know. And I know many people who had no idea about what's happening and they wouldn't even believe it. And so what were the methods used to uncover and verify the information in your investigation?
Yeah, there were like you said, it is not many people knew about this, and stories like this, investigations like this, they take a long time, but they also take a big team with a team with a variety of skills. So how we work at Lighthouse is that we initiate international investigations, and we lead the investigations, but we do that together with a group of media partners. So in this case, we work together with 7 other media partners from around the world, from media that have an international reach like the Washington Post, but also with more local media on the ground with a local audience and deep local knowledge in Morocco and in Tunisia. We worked with local journalists in Mauritania. So it was, in total, we had more than 40 investigators and journalists working on this. And the methods that we use is a mixture of investigative journalism, ground reporting in the countries, but we also have with Lighthouse digital investigators, so people specialized in open source investigations, looking for videos, documents, anything that is available online. We have money trails capacity, which was very much needed for this investigation, because the European Union and European countries, they know that these kind of operations are really something that are illegal and against international law. So they are trying to hide what they are supporting and doing. And in order to trace back the European funds to these operations, it needs people with these kind of skills. By going through contracts, following the money back to European taxpayers, basically, um, and it needed people with experience in working in basically in conflict areas and conflict zones in order um, to gather the visual evidence that is needed to really demonstrate to a wide audience that these operations are being carried out.
Mm-hmm. So on this note, how did you get access to the main protagonist of your stories? There are many very direct, very specific stories of people who actually experienced what you're describing to us. Did they come to you? Did you find them somewhere? How did the process look like?
I would say a mixture of both. So in Tunisia, we worked together with the correspondent for Le Monde, who is based in Tunisia and who had already reporting about the crisis in Tunisia and the situation of migrants and asylum seekers in the country. So he was in touch with quite a number of people, um, and for example, we interviewed a couple that was dumped in the desert by Tunisian forces. Later, they were able to make it to Germany, but they had a really an awful experience. They were not only left in the desert without water for long, but also the woman was pregnant, and because she didn't have water and the amount of stress, she lost her unborn child in the desert that's because of these actions. Um, in Morocco, we it wasn't that hard to find people that experienced this, because basically everybody who was not from Morocco, every Black African migrant or asylum seeker that we spoke to knew about this, and the vast majority has experienced the practices carried out by the Moroccan authorities. And in Mauritania, it basically the same. That the team was able through community leaders to win the trust of people to share their story. And of course, we had to be interviewing these people. We had to be extremely careful not to put them in danger. So interviews happened at quiet locations. They happened during the night. And of course, wherever needed, anonymously.
I was wondering if you know what is happening to those people, if you're following their stories, if some of them crossed, or are they still somewhere in Morocco or Mauritania?
Yeah, so we kept in touch with some of the people, not with all of them, because people are constantly on the move. They are switching phones. They might also not be interested in to keep talking to us, but of course we are still in touch with some of them. So the couple that I mentioned earlier, they managed to cross the central Mediterranean later, and they managed to go to Germany, where they are seeking asylum now, and but also she got pregnant again and she has a healthy baby. So that is kind of positive note to an otherwise quite sad investigation and sad story.
Klaas, you mentioned a little bit that European Union doesn't really want to speak and wants to cover the whole story. I would just like to read something from one of your reports. So one consultant who worked on a project funded by the EU Trust Fund. And Trust Fund is this fund where EU has given Tunisia, Mauritania and Morocco more than 400 million for migration management, as it's called, in recent years. So this consultant said about the aim of this fund. You have to make migrants' life difficult, complicate their lives. If you leave a migrant from Guinea in Sahara in the desert twice, the third time he will ask you to voluntarily be brought back home. So what is the European Commission official position on your investigation? Have they commented anyhow on any of the articles?
No, they haven't. Not really. They haven't responded to the questions that we put forward. They also didn't deny that it was happening. They were avoiding the answers. And when they were pressed by other journalists from other media on during press briefings that they have in Brussels, they kind of said that they would look into it, and that they would investigate, and and basically the answer that they're always giving is that we will ask, or we ask the countries that we are partnering with to respect human rights and international law, and that is about it.
It's such a comfortable answer, right? It's like, on one hand, you're still European Union, the beacon of human rights, and you're showing it on paper, and then something like this is happening, and still not many people know about even the funding of the management of the migration in other countries. Not many people know that the real reason behind this is actually to stop people from crossing to the European Union. And I'm really thinking that it's such a comfortable excuse or answer to just say that we're looking into it, we always ask them, but it's not our fault. Like, there's no checking on your investment, so to say, right? 400 million to only those 3 countries in the last few years, and you're not really giving any extra obligations to those countries. That seriously means that you really don't care about what is happening to those people.
No, they don't, and they know exactly what is happening to the people. So one of the other things that we found was that we found minutes of a meeting by the European Commission's commissioners. So these are the people, let's say the highest in command, the top of the European Union, and they in 2018 they were already discussing the practices that are happening in Morocco, these dumps of a massive amount of people, and they just noted it down, and then in a paragraph below they decided to give Morocco another 100 million to manage migration. And they are the other thing that we've figured out through the budgets was that they directly funding the paramilitary group that I mentioned before. So they are carrying out these arrests or kidnaps on the street.
But is the financing happening through the governments of Northern Africa, or directly by the EU?
No, so it's going through the Ministry of Interior, and the Ministry of Interior is directing or under the command of the King in Morocco, and the paramilitary groups are receiving funding from the Ministry of Interior and are more or less reporting directly to the King.
taking part in official public procurement. Sorry.
Hi, everyone. This is Doug from Refocus. Many of you probably know that for the past 8 years, myself and my wife, Sonia, have been working here in Greece, supporting refugees and asylum seekers to develop media creation skills and have a chance at pursuing careers in media. And this has been a life passion for us. But the earliest stages of this on the island of Lesbos in 2016 motivated us to do something. We thought, how could we as individuals do something to change the situation, which was young people from lots of different places in the world who did not have access to education, who were not being provided any formal opportunities for skills training. And so we created Refocus as a way to change that narrative and change that reality. And we are now here 8 years later with an international network of labs in Greece, in Poland, and in Germany. But that's not possible without really, really consistent support from individuals just like you. And so in this giving season, we're really hoping that you can find it in your bank accounts and find it in your hearts to support the expansion of our programming. The work that we do and the money that we receive, we do not receive money from governments. We receive the predominant amount of support from individuals just like yourself. And that money goes to cover the costs of our programming, the overhead of our labs, and the employment of our most seasoned media creators, those who went through our program and now are teachers. We're very different than the schools that you have back home, where you have endowments and you have an opportunity for families to support their next generation kids who are going to the same school they went to. We don't have that luxury. And so we have to do it as a community. And we are very thankful for all the support that we've received to date. And we hope that you can continue to support us into the future.
So there is not a lot of good history between North African countries and Europe. Maybe now a little bit, but there is always that dark side that nobody wants to go there, especially these generations. So how Europe uses these international political issues and their, in a way, dominance to influence the way they want North African to manage the migration for them?
As a leverage?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think what they're using is they, well, it might also be the other way around. So it is Northern African countries, they have a leverage over Europe. So Europe approaches them for a deal because they want to stop the people coming to Europe. And they are prepared to give a lot of money to the countries. And these countries, they can use that money, but also they can use it as leverage, or use the people, the asylum seekers and migrants, as leverage towards Europe. And Libya did that, but you saw it. You could have seen it in Tunisia as well, where European Union made a deal, or Team Europe as they called it. They made a deal in Tunisia, where then the Tunisian government, or dictator Sayed, said, well, but we actually don't have a deal and we don't want to have the money from the EU. And he let a lot of people crossing the central Mediterranean just to put pressure on the EU. And then the EU came back with a better offer. And then all of a sudden he signed, and he made sure that nobody crossed the central Mediterranean by intercepting the small boats that people are taking and then dumping people in the desert. And Libya has done exactly this for years. Morocco is doing it with Spain each and every time. So you most of the time, whenever there is a minister or prime minister from Spain going towards Morocco, they, in the weeks before, they let a lot of people through to put pressure on Spain. And then after the visit, or just before the visit, they close the borders, and then they make a better deal. Mm-hmm. And that's how these countries are doing it. And Mauritania is exactly playing the same trick. And this is kind of the weak spot of Europe. All of these countries, they know that they can put pressure on the European Commission and European countries by weaponizing people in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, we actually saw what was happening in Turkey, right? When Erdogan a few years ago decided to just open the border because he was not getting the third installment from the European Commission. And suddenly, I remember we were on Lesbos at the time, and one morning, and within half an hour, 40-something boats arrived. It was crazy. Nobody could manage this crisis. What was happening in the northern border from Turkey to Greece? People were being basically brought with buses to the border and forcibly crossing, basically, almost. And he got what he wanted. So
I remember it was him or one of his ministers said we wanted Europe to get a taste of what we have, and he was making like we have 4 million, so we're gonna release 40,000 and let them see. It's just they're playing with Europe to get more money and.
That's right, and then the reaction from the European Union was from Ursula von der Leyen, and that she went to the border between Greece and Turkey, and she was telling the Greeks, like, you are Europe's shield, and we are standing behind you, we support you. And this phrase, you can hear it now over and over again at European countries where border guards are just stopping people, even if that means that people are being pushed back or sent back, deported to horrible circumstances, or even when people die, because this is what they think their role is: guard Europe's borders, because the enemy is coming. People have been told over and over again that whoever is seeking asylum or want to come to Europe is basically an enemy. Which is, of course, completely nonsense.
Yeah, we said it already several times, quoting somebody, I really don't know who said it first, but refugees are this perfect present for Europe, not because of their skills or their ability to now enter the labor market, but because everything can be blamed on them. They can be used as political power as much as somebody wants, right? They are this like perfect factor that scares away everybody and puts fuel on certain political movements.
Yeah, absolutely. And because they most of the time they are not able to defend themselves, and you can just blame them for all the problems that people are experiencing in European countries. And that's why I believe that a number of politicians, almost all of them, will always create the problem, or they will keep migration as an issue or as a problem rather than seeing it as a solution or something that is actually needed for Europe, for example.
In Poland, for a very long time, just before elections, during the campaign, we had those two topics. It was either LGBTQ community or refugees and migrants. But the thing was that, like, the refugees and the fear from refugees was so fakely implemented because we didn't really have refugees in Poland at the time. Now, yes, we have Ukrainians, we have a crisis at the border with Belarus. But 5 years ago, we had basically Ukrainian migrants coming for economical purposes to Poland. And we had some, very few refugees from Chechnya, for example. There was no problem whatsoever. But they could still put it in people's heads because of what was happening in Mediterranean, for example, that this is such a massive problem and making the whole campaign around it. It's incredible, and how media are buying it. There's almost no debate about those really important issues because you can cover everything with those scaring factors of refugees or LGBTQ community.
No, that's and I think you're touching upon a point that's maybe the main thing behind all of this is why people are buying this. Because I think also the war in Ukraine showed that Europe is capable of receiving millions of people. They all of a sudden they were allowed to work, and the special laws were made and designed and implemented. There was plenty of money. So all of a sudden it was possible. The only difference with refugees from other countries in other areas is that the other refugees, they're either black or Muslim. And that is, so it comes down, it's racism.
It is.
And that is what it is. So it's just that not many people want to acknowledge this.
Yes, it's exactly what you said about this situation, that the war in Ukraine shows exactly that Europe was capable of taking in a huge number of refugees at once. They really came.
They were happy about it.
Yes,
also.
within a very short period of time, and but refugees from the south were coming slowly compared to the refugees from Ukraine. And again, not saying anything about Ukrainian refugees. They absolutely deserved the asylum. But the crisis, what we are calling the refugee crisis, is not a crisis of scale. It really is not. It is a crisis of political will in this matter, and everything on top of this, racism for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when you look at the future and you think about how many people we actually need in Europe to maintain the welfare states that we have, that there are a lack of medical personnel, there is a lack of teachers, and that's just the beginning. And then there are all these people willing to work, but we just don't want them. So yeah, that will have also a massive effect in the future on our economies in Europe.
And I wonder when we're actually going to wake up, when actually the politicians will wake up to this reality, because it will catch up with us for sure at some point. I was at this conference already some time ago in Romania, and the ambassador of Bangladesh was saying that there's a simple solution to cutting the numbers of refugees coming to Europe right now. Because, for example, there are people who are in those migration groups from his country as well, right? We don't have like a big migration group or many people asking for asylum from Bangladesh, maybe in Europe, but for sure there are some. And he's like, there's a very simple solution. You need, and he quoted data from almost every European country, especially Scandinavian countries, this and this much of this and this many hands to work in the next 10, 20 years in order to keep your welfare, keep your economy going. Why aren't you opening working visa programs? Numbers that work for you, that can help us, and you will really cut a lot of your problems. You will not spend that much money on the border control and management of migration crisis, because there are countries where people are actually crossing right now simply to work, right, for economical reasons, but they have absolutely no other option. They will not get visa to any other European country. So the poverty, the conditions they live in, are forcing them to go on this irregular route.
No, that's absolutely right, and I think many scholars have said this as well. Like, this is the solution is, well, not when it comes to wars, but when it comes to solving the so-called crisis, which is indeed a political crisis, is to open up legal pathways. But Europe is doing the opposite. They're making it harder for people to come by closing the borders, making it more expensive. People have to rely on smugglers even more than they used to. But not only that, it's also for people in the majority of this world, but they have to buy more expensive visa, and it is than previously. So they are making it harder and harder for people to come.
Absolutely.
Europe is maybe choosing violence to deal with this. And you said about leaders, they are not waking up. And I think they are doing more because they are now hiring these militias and gangsters to deal with it. And I saw an article in The Guardian. Meloni faces, is the Prime Minister of Italy, Meloni faces questions after Italy frees Libyan general accused of war crimes. So this general, Osama Najim, he is the head of the prison Mitija, where they torture, where they rape political prisoners and migrations. It's like a detention center. And so he was in Italy. There was a warrant to get him, and Rome let him go the next day. Yeah, so, and now the Prime Minister has to answer about this. I think she's not going to do anything about it. And when you see something like that, you say, how is this going to help?
For sure, part of some kind of deal.
Yeah, because if he was not helping them, he would never get away with it. I don't know, it's very scary.
It is. Klaas, can I ask you about the smugglers' networks in North Africa? Because I was wondering if they grew in this process of, maybe not the process, but ever since those pushbacks, let's call them, or dumps in deserts started, because it seems like this would be a natural thing to have more of those smugglers group being formed, because people were desperate and would definitely look for any type of help, and they need help when they are dumped in the desert, water, any type of food and things like this. So are you aware of this?
I don't have any exact numbers or statistics, and I believe that nobody is really gathering this. Also, the European Union doesn't have data on smuggling networks or smuggling activity, how much money they are making, etc., which is actually kind of weird when you think about it, because they make such a big fuss about fighting these criminal networks, but there isn't even a common definition on what smuggling is. And in Europe, there isn't a common understanding what this actually means, because a lot of smugglers are also they don't see themselves per se as criminals. They see themselves as somebody or a network that facilitates. And you can even raise the question how much money they actually make. And of course, there are a lot of bad smugglers, but it's also people confuse smugglers and traffickers. So the traffickers are the ones that are torturing people for ransom, that are selling people or use them as slaves. And this is what you, for example, see in Libya, but it's also now happening in Tunisia and in other places where there are traffickers being active, who are forcing people to work, but also sometimes to force them to go on bad boats and send them off. And so they are not smugglers, they are traffickers, and yeah, they are criminals. But it's also known that whenever the European Union is implementing new measures to try and stop migration, then that's basically the perfect day for criminals, for these networks, because they know that people have nowhere to go. People want to go to Europe, and they are willing to pay. And if they have to pay more, they will pay more. So they can say it's going to be a longer journey. It's going to be more expensive because it's more difficult. And you can see this happening, for example, in at the border between Bosnia and Croatia. Croatia made it, with the help of the European Union, really difficult to get inside the EU. And from the latest things that I heard from people there is that that forced people to work with gangs that are active. And if you try to go by yourself crossing the border between Bosnia and Croatia, the traffickers, the criminals, they will be able to find you and they will beat you up or teach you a lesson and tell you next time you go with us. So it's completely counterproductive what the EU is doing.
Exactly. Because, in a way, like, people will at some point cross, even if it's a lower number or something. For security reason, if we're using this argument, wouldn't it be better to know who's coming? So building some kind of reception centers, verifying people and deciding who has a right to claim asylum, who doesn't, and at least knowing the identity of people, rather than allowing people to just enter and then disappear somewhere in Europe, right? If we're using the safety argument.
Yeah, for example, indeed. And at the moment, there are many people coming from Sudan that are coming in via Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, and trying to cross. If you're a Sudanese person at the moment where there is an active war, where else can you go? You cannot stay in Egypt because they either deport you back to Sudan and you will probably be killed. You cannot go to Libya because then you will be forced to work or you will be tortured. Tunisia, you will be dumped in the desert or sold to the Libyans. In Chad, there's a war going on and there are hardly any services for people there. And you can go on, but and down south is South Sudan that faces nearly a famine. In Ethiopia, there's a war. In Eritrea, there's a dictatorship. There's nowhere to go, but Europe. And what the EU should do is what we discussed before: is we should help people that are in need. They are fleeing a war.
This is what international law tells us to do. We are obliged by international norms, right?
Yeah, indeed.
I think the real goal here for them is to stop them from coming, not like you said. We should, yeah. They just don't want to say it, but sometimes they say it, like, we don't want them. Yeah, some people in Poland, some people are saying it. We don't want anybody. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to ask about the media coverage or lack of coverage impacting the awareness. I read a lot of media from North Africa and it's always against them, but they never mention this deal with Europe, as if they have orders not to, as if they are doing it from their own will, and they talk about it as we are, protecting our borders and stuff. So how maybe Europe media doing, how they are impacting the awareness of people?
So I think when it comes to desert dumps, I don't believe then that many. So some people. So when we released the investigation, people knew maybe about or did hear about the dumps that Tunisia was doing at the time, and because that was huge international news in Europe, that Europe made the deal with Tunisia, and then the response from Tunisia about this. So there was quite a bit of coverage. What people didn't realize was that this kind of practice had been happening for years in other countries, and it is a system because the dumps and the operations, they work so similarly in all of these countries, and that is exactly what we wanted to show. And I think with this investigation that we released, it is now at least at policy levels and in Brussels, but also people who are following the topic, desert dumps became kind of a common phrase at this stage. So we were able to reach a lot of people, and we see that there is also interest from other media to follow up on these kind of practices. So hopefully they will continue to do that.
So on this note, what was the response from policymakers, NGOs, other stakeholders? You told us that the European Commission, European Union as such, doesn't really want to comment on that. But has there been any other response from other parties?
Yeah, absolutely, and also opposition leaders within Europe, but also in national parliaments. Questions were asked to the European Commission, but also in national parliaments. Parliamentary questions were asked. NGOs, they use the information to organize meetings. We also made a documentary out of the investigation that was screened on various occasions. And then still we are being invited to talk about this, like here in this podcast, about a practice that had been going on for many years, but it's so far away from basically anyone, and also scrutiny, that it's really hard to make it visible. But yeah, we managed to get that at least for a little while into the spotlights, and we're trying to keep doing that by going around with the results of the investigation.
Lately, we covered here on the podcast how Greece was found guilty on the pushbacks. Do you see something like this happening to other Europeans for what they are doing in the desert dumps in the near future?
I think it will be. Processes like that take years, and it will take time. What I do believe, where there are possibilities to investigate or to put more pressure on the EU, is when, for example, independent bodies like Olaf, who are the anti-fraud
agency,
the anti-fraud agency, that they can investigate the funds that were being used, and if the funds were used unlawfully. And that's the thing that really scares the European Commission, because that's the anti-fraud agency are maybe the only thing that they're really afraid of.
Are there any investigations happening right now? I remember a few years ago there was one looking into how Greece is managing or mismanaging the funds they're receiving to manage the humanitarian crisis, because they couldn't really explain where did the money go, and most of it went to the army, but we cannot really find the outcomes of this investigation.
I'm not aware of any investigation by Olaf at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Klaas, thank you so much for giving us this update and basically throwing some light on the situation, because as we mentioned, it is really an underreported story. Despite all your efforts, the knowledge about this is not very big. So thank you very much, and good luck to you with all the other investigations.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you to our partners, Choose Love, Aperture, Leave No One Behind, and Alliance. Remember that Fractured Now is every week. Different formats, but still very interesting. So make sure that you check your favorite podcasting platform to join us in a week's time.